Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Africa-focused sessions, and welcome to the room. This is me calling the meeting to order. My name is Prudence Ngwenya from the African Union Commission. Again, welcome to the Africa-focused session, and the theme of the session is Maputo at 20, Bridging the Gap Between Policies and People. I'm sure all of you are aware that we are at the cusp of the Maputo Protocol turning 20 years. Our first guest of honor is Her Excellency Salif Johnson, who is going to deliver our keynote address. As she walks up to the stage, allow me to briefly introduce Her Excellency is a Liberian politician and an economist who was the president of Liberia from 2006 to 2018. She can sit here. You can stand. Yes. You can go to the podium. Yes. I forgot to tell you that she was the first woman to be elected head of state for an African country. And she is also a Nobel Prize winner. Over to you, Your Excellency.
Thank you very much. Please sit down. Madam Moderator, Prudence, Ngwenya, First Ladies of the Republic of Burundi and the Republic of Namibia, fellow panelists, Excellencies, sisters and brothers. It's always a pleasure to be here in Kigali, where we see a president who works assiduously to fulfill our theme today, bridging the gap between policies and people in many ways, particularly in ensuring that legal and policy frameworks as well as aspirations for greater women participation and leadership are implemented and realized. I think if many of you were at the program yesterday and we listened to President Kagame, I would say to every woman organization, get a copy of his speech. Take down all the measures he took, the policies that he laid out, the actions that he took to ensure gender equity, and see if we can be the champions to look at how our own countries are doing and the leaders of our countries are trying to do likewise. And so I congratulate him, and I congratulate all the other leaders who are also taking steps to close the gap between pronouncement and practice, trying to ensure that commitments made do not remain on paper alone. I saw this firsthand 2 years ago when the African Women Leaders Network decided, in part of its ambitious program, to be able to tackle the issues that relate to the attitudes of men. And how do we make sure that we bring them along for them to support all the policies and measures that we aspire to for gender equity? And so we joined several heads of state in the Democratic Republic of Congo for the first presidential level men's meeting on positive masculinity, whatever that means. It was a groundbreaking event, followed by a second meeting in Senegal, and we all listened to what President Macky Sall had to say yesterday about the measures he's taken to support gender equity. Many of our current leaders agreed to take direct responsibility for the fight against violence against women and girls, resulting in the declaration and the call to action. We now look forward to the third meeting in November, when we will have the opportunity to congratulate them on their agreement to take forward an African Union Convention on ending violence against women and girls in Africa. As you clap, and I clap, let's be champions to make sure that we get that convention signed on by all of our leaders. We are also heartened by the numbers of countries that are signatories to the Maputo Protocol that many of you know very well, that has called for action, whose 20th anniversary we are celebrating this year. Another encouraging sign is the work of AFIWA, the African Development Bank's new focus on ending exclusion of women from the main financial rooms and the mechanisms of finance. And they have committed to throwing open the means whereby millions, indeed, as I read the pamphlet, I believe Dr. Esseni said billions of dollars that would be available for those women who are leaders in business, those who are aspiring to build the capital that will enable them to support other women, to enable those women in public service to rise to their ambition in holding higher positions. These are all good news. They deserve celebration. But allow me to say, and I'm sure you will agree, that it is simply not enough. Too many women are still living lives constrained by poverty, inequity, and many times violence. Their days are filled sometimes with scarcity and drudgery, seared by fear and desperation. Many are in areas where creeping conflicts are narrowing the space in which they can act, and their aspirations are reduced to foraging for food and trying to protect themselves and their children from violent armed militias. They do not feel the presence or their ownership in the state. We are still working to silence the guns. And we find too many times the insurgencies of militias that are parading in many of our countries with too many guns. These are conflicts in many of our areas, particularly in West Africa, that have widened. This is why we continue to work. This is why we have to say that as we now celebrate the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, it's time that we all act more forcibly, more determinedly, to ensure that equity is for all. Those who are marginalized, most times women, but also many times the disadvantaged and the youth, they all require a part of that equity. And for those women where there are glaring illustrations of gaps between people in place, what we need are the leadership in our countries. Leadership that stand firm in a commitment, that set the example that we can all look to and we can be able to say to them that they have done their duty in the promotion of hope, peace, justice, and equity. We ask for their accountability for the policies and the actions they have taken to be able to claim the action in these regards. My strong belief is that one of the major gaps between policies and failures is the failed promise to women. Women wait a bit too long for justice. And not just those of us who are in this room. I think we are the favored few. We are the ones that have access to things that enable us to come to meetings like this and talk. But just think of the many in those areas where all the women know is how do they get the next food to feed their children? How can they be assured that if they are arrested for one reason or the other and they go to courts, that they can be assured that they will have justice? We are the champions of those women because as we move forward to achieve our higher positions of leadership, we must reach back. We must be able to pull them with us. We must be able to see them in the circle that we are in so that they too feel the ownership and the equity that we all wish. And so, as I ended my own tenure of 12 years of public service as president, my commitment is to ensure that I promote women to achieve higher levels of position in public service. We know that it's possible. We have already identified so many women in 19 countries across our continent, with the possibility to extend to all the other countries as our own capacity and resources are able to do so. And we have women who have already committed themselves to the journey of achieving high levels of position in public service, whether in the executive through appointments or in elective office through competition. And I say to you, with no fear, that we're not asking. Women are not asking for favors. We are competent, able, knowledgeable, courageous. We have the tenacity to be able to stand up and claim the leadership. And so I have what we call the Amuje Leaders Initiative. Not only do all these women come together in just a platform in which they exchange ideas and they exchange strategies, but also they have mentorship. Mentorship that so many of you in this room are in a position to give to them, where they take advice from other women, women who have already advanced in high leaderships and have established themselves and made a difference in society. We ask you to be a part of that movement. The movement that says, if we take office, and we're going to do it with all determination, we'll do it unapologetically. And so I look forward to so many of you that will be speaking. I have to, I'm told, run off to another assignment with the elders, but I leave with you that clarion call that women are on a joining that's irreversible, one in which we challenge all of the stereotyping and all of the obstacles that have stopped women from achieving their goals and their aspirations. And we stand on the shoulders of so many of the other women on our continent that have done what we aspire to do, to stand out, to be a leader, to take position, to challenge inequities, to make sure that women take the positions where all the things that we see as inequities and injustice can be not only challenged, but can be changed. That's what our women challenges are all about. And that's the message I leave with you. Be a champion for women. Be a leader of women. That's our mandate, that's our mantra. May your meetings be very exciting, and may the result of these meetings show us the way as to how we can continue with the strength, the determination, and the commitment to ensure that one day women will rule the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Indeed, as women, we are not a monolith. We are beauty, we are queens, we are competent, we are resilient, we are everything. Thank you very much. At this point in time, I'd like to also say that it is estimated that 85% of the African population, you are either a young person or a woman. So as you can see, out of the multitude and millions of people on the continent, we don't have that 85% here in the room. However, we have a plan. I'd like you to meet 3 people that we've carried with us here, not physically, but they're here in the room with us. Tag team, please take us to meeting these people.
Hello everyone, my name is Aisha. I am so happy to meet you all.
Hi, my name is Kofi. You'll hear a bit more about me as well as Aisha and Ngwenya later on. I'm excited to be here.
Hello, my name is Ondwasi. I'm so excited for the Africa Focus sessions today and tomorrow.
To the next session, where we are going to be speaking about 3 Ps: policies, partnerships, and people. People like the people you've met in here. Welcome, panel, to the floor, and please take your seats. Our first speaker is going to be Ms. Karen Ondwasi, who is a young leader who is incredibly passionate about advocating for gender equality and the rights of girls and young women. She served as the first chair of the Gender is My Gender Women's Network in Africa, which was created to recognize and amplify young women's voices and advocacy efforts across the continent. Karen, I invite you to make your short statement.
Thank you so much. I would like to recognize the Her Excellency, Madam Ellen, Her Excellency Dr. Monique, and Ms. Malabo. It's a pleasure to sit here and represent young people of Africa. And as it has been mentioned earlier, we appreciate the shoulders that we stand on. The women who've paved the way for us to be here, to continue advocating for the gender agenda in the continent. Maputo Protocol has continued to play a significant role. However, as we go to the next 20 years, we are looking to see this instrument simplified and localized in a way that it will help the people in the community, which is intended for. As this year, African Union has been implementing the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, we are excited because it's going to be an opportunity for women to be economically empowered. However, we are all aware of the negative impacts this will have, including sexual exploitation of young women. As a result, we call upon all stakeholders to put in place the right measures so that we do not undo all the effort we've done for the past 20 years. May we protect the women's rights even as we continue to advocate for economic inclusion. At this juncture, I want to appreciate the countries that have included women in leadership positions, and we've seen an increase in number of women leaders, especially here in Rwanda where we are. However, it is worth noting that numbers do not equate to transformation. So we call upon the women who've been elected to hold position for us, to hold positions for young women, so that wherever they are speaking the gender agenda. On behalf of all young people represented here, we reiterate our commitment to continue advocating for gender equality in the best way we know how to, be it TikTok, be it through technology. We will hold our position and ensure gender is our agenda. Thank you so much, my sister.
Thank you very much, Karen. Karen, Kofi, Aisha, and Ngwenya are some of the young people that you're going to be hearing from today throughout the session, and the panel is going to be answering in some ways, answering to some of the questions that they will raise later on. At this point in time, I'd like to invite you, Malado. By the way, lovely to see you. Invite you to take the stage. Malado is the Director of the Gender, Women and Civil Society Department at the African Development Bank. Over to you, ma'am.
Can you hear me? Oh, yes, now, thank you. Good morning, everybody, and thank you very much, my dear sister. Her Excellency Monique Sanzabagwana, Deputy Chair of the African Union Commission, Ms. Karen Ondwasi, member of the Gender is My Agenda Youth Network, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is a real pleasure to be here on behalf of the President of the African Development Bank, Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, who is known to be a great champion of women empowerment, a real he for she. He sends his warmest regards. I want maybe to shed light on one story that I believe really characterizes how we can bridge policies, how we can bridge the gap between policies and people. We know that Africa is home to the largest number of women entrepreneurs across the continent, and 80% of these women are engaged in micro and sometimes also informal activities. But they are also often unable to access financing that they need to grow their businesses. And often they also face discrimination and harassment when they try to seek it out. The bank's Affirmative Finance Action for Women in Africa, also known as AFAWA, was set up to address this particular problem. We are seeking to close the estimated $42 billion gap for women entrepreneurs in Africa. And this year, we've reached a major milestone, reaching $1 billion of lending for women across the continent, and we are particularly proud of that, and we are continuing to do so. While these figures, may sound quite impressive, there are obviously real stories about real people, real women behind it. And let me share one story. In 2014, we had Bernadette Umunyana, who runs Dokmai Rwanda, a luxury leatherwork brand that makes all of its goods in Rwanda using local raw materials. She started with 2 employees in 2014, working out from her home. To grow her business, she needed a loan, which, as we know, can be very difficult to get. And because of AFAWA, she was able to get that loan through a program that was set up with one of the local banks. And now she's employs 39 people across 2 companies. So that means that is 39 families whose livelihoods she has been able to positively impact. We are replicating these stories across 30 countries now, working with more than 60 financial institutions. And we will continue with our efforts, obviously. So this is how we believe, with this story, we believe that these are some of the examples of how the banks program are bridging the gap between policies and people. And as we mark the 20th anniversary of the Maputo Protocol, it is clear that there is more for us to be done. But the stories of the women who have benefited from the bank's work also continue to motivate us every day. I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Director Malado. This story is really, really motivational. Your Excellency, the Deputy Chairperson, before I hand you the floor, briefly, Her Excellency is the first Deputy Chairperson of the African Union, female Deputy Chairperson of the African Union Commission. And Dr. Monique Nsanzabagana holds a PhD in economics and has over 25 years in financial and economic inclusion work across the continent. Your Excellency, we're speaking about policies. How do they reach people through partnerships? Over to you.
Thank you so much. I'll answer to your question. But let me, before I get there, once again welcome you to this Africa plenary session that we are co-hosting with as African Union Commission in collaboration with the African Development Bank. And I'm even more delighted to deliver this note from Rwanda, the land of 1,000 hills and the land of my forebearers during a month. Thank you so much. During the month of July, where Africa celebrates, African women contributed in the African anti-colonial and anti-apartheid struggles. And indeed, the point has been made that Rwanda is the right place for this. First ever women deliver in Africa. And we know that this African trailblazer, which is Rwanda, ranking number 1 on parliament inclusion of gender, actually of women, a trailblazer in its right is followed by other African countries. Actually, among the top 20, we also count Senegal, South Africa, Namibia, and Mozambique. And the success story coming out of Africa is positive and is possible because of a very strong and progressive legal policy instruments, such as the Maputo Protocol, which actually turned 20 last week on the 11th of July. This, we are told, and you know it's true, is the most progressive instrument globally because it speaks to a highly comprehensive set of human rights for women and girls in Africa, which is also customized to the realities on the continent. And we know that the African continent is also leading the world with 34 national action plans on the implementation of the United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325 on women, peace and security. And this is many thanks to the Office of the Special Envoy on Women, Peace and Security, another first innovative institutional mechanism from Africa to the world. This office started as a special envoy to the chairperson of the African Union Commission. But now we have institutionalized it into a fully fledged permanent department. So I'm truly excited to mention that while the world is calling for a global treaty on ending violence against women and girls, we have heard from our former president, Johnson Sirleaf, that actually the African Union has committed to start negotiating a convention to end violence against women and girls. And the convention, a first of the world again, will also prepare Africa to set global standards on how to push back this scourge of violence against women and girls. Yet another standard setter is the Women and Youth in Trade Protocol that is being finalized under the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. So, coming to your question, the AU is mindful that actually violence against women and girls and dealing with other discriminatory practices against women will not end unless women are economically independent. And hence, we are implementing the Women and Youth Financial and Economic Inclusion Initiative to deliver on the African Women's Decade on financial and economic inclusion. This decade will run, actually started a couple of years back, 2020 to 2030. We will be now talking about how do we bridge the gap between all these that I mentioned, very normative policy frameworks, progressive ones, and the reality we are seeing still on the ground. That is where the challenge is. So this initiative, the Wi-Fi, is actually comprising a 10-point agenda that is aiming actually to see how we can indeed achieve tangible impacts. At the personal level, we are talking of, can we include women, youth, on our workplace, on employment, on every, we have quotas, 50% for women parity, 35% for youth. This is something that we need to pursue. We are talking about access to cheaper, a diverse range of products that are fit for purpose and that are affordable, that are responsible, and that are provided by our financial institutions. So we need to hold these financial institutions to account. Our private sector, our financial sector, we need to hold them to account. How are they providing for this? And also women, how are they uptaking this? We need to talk about vibrant and relevant resource pooling mechanisms in savings, cooperative schemes. You know, we talk to the women professionals here and there. How are we actually getting it ourselves so that we take part in this struggle of actually making sure that our economies work? The care economy, and how do we ease the burden to women? At the meso level, we are looking at issues such as digitalization, trapping transaction platforms, and also regulatory frameworks and others. At the macro level, we are now telling our ministers, our governors of central banks, our policymakers in general, how do we have policies that create jobs, industrialize Africa, create market access for women and youth? How do we ease access to factors of production, starting by land? These are the real issues we have now to tackle. And how do we also facilitate access to technology? So the African Union is working with our partners. So between the policies and the people, in the middle, we are harnessing partnerships. Partnerships here in all the sectors: public, private, philanthropy, civil society. Whatever you are doing, can we come together and account to the women and youth of Africa? We want to account to $100 billion, flow to 10 million women and youth and SMEs for this decade. So that is the framework that we are creating, so that we use our convening power so that we can collaborate with all of you here. Whatever you're doing, let's syndicate it, put it together so that we can show that we are making progress. A lot of things are happening, but we are not celebrating enough what is happening. We are not amplifying it enough. We are not taking it to scale enough. So that is what we are trying to do, so that from policy, then to reach people for better.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. It really speaks to synergistic efforts, bringing every partner together to deliver for women. I want to take the opportunity to thank the panel at this point in time for your time. And because of time, as you are ushered out of this stage, I'm calling upon my co-pilot, Chika, to come. But before Chika comes, I request the tech team to introduce us to our first woman who's going to speak to us about her story. And let me introduce you to Aisha. Chika, please come through.
Hello everyone, my name is Aisha. I am so happy to meet you all. I am a 28-year-old woman from Northern Africa. A few years ago, when I finished high school, I had two paths in front of me. One path will either lead me to a life of turbulence and unmet dreams, and the other would allow me to pursue my education and unleash my potential. Thanks to the African Union's 1 Million by 2021 initiative, I was able to go to university and upskill myself over the years. When COVID-19 struck the world, I had to be innovative about working online, so my business could not suffer. In addition to this, I work at a big firm and make a good living. I also got married in June of 2022, and for someone looking at my life from the outside, they might consider me to be quite successful. I am proud of the life I have created for myself. But I have a problem. My husband was patient and supportive to me, but he has recently become increasingly more violent. It began with him raising his voice at me, and then one day, he pushed me. The secret I cannot tell anyone is that he has started physically abusing me. I don't know how to seek for help without angering him even further. The biggest challenge is that in my community, this behavior from him is considered to be normal. Some people have even cautioned me against becoming too successful, as it may make my husband uncomfortable and my home unbearable. What do I need to do to be protected by the provisions of the Maputo Protocol?
What do I need to do to be protected by the provisions of the Maputo Protocol? That is the question that you all just heard posed at the end of that video. And I would like to expand the scope of that question, if you will allow me to. What can we all do to ensure that girls such as Aisha, that you saw in the video, will be protected by the Maputo Protocol? Good morning, distinguished delegates, members of the press, and fellow champions for gender equality. My name is Chika Odua, and right now we're going to begin the first panel of this plenary session. The conversation will be about the Maputo Protocol and how it engages people and partnerships to tackle violence against women and girls in Africa. Joining me on stage, we have Her Excellency, the Honorable Commissioner Janet Ramatui Salangier, Special Rapporteur on the Rights of Women in Africa for the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. It is such an honor to have you here with us, Madam.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much. We have Dr. Nyawadzai Ngombonzvanda, former African Union Ambassador on ending child marriage. It is a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Murakoze-jan.
Thank you. We have His Royal Highness, King Mansour Magizo, a traditional leader from Niger. Bienvenue, Monsieur. Last but not least, we have Ms. Nasket Gebrehan, the Director of Violence Against Women Prevention for Raising Voices in Uganda. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you.
So let's get started. We have a lot to talk about. The Maputo Protocol is a comprehensive and very progressive legal instrument that ensures the promotion and protection of women and girls across Africa in the area of human rights. Just recently, in July to be exact, there was a 2-day session held in Nairobi, Kenya to commemorate 20 years of this groundbreaking protocol. So now I'd like to ask the Honorable Commissioner, can you talk about this event, what happened in Nairobi, talk about the outcomes and how those outcomes can be actualized by the African Union, by civil society, by governments, and the private sector?
Thank you very much, Chika. It is really a pleasure for me to be here, to be addressing you on issues relating to the celebration of the Maputo Protocol at 20. As you rightly observe, the Maputo Protocol is a groundbreaking instrument, and it's the Bill of Rights for women in the African continent. So the celebration was a momentous event, and I must say the last week was a celebratory event. We had a lot of activities to commemorate the Maputo at 20, and the event was attended by women and men all over the continent, and I insist men, because it's not only the women that address women's rights issues, all over the continent. And we celebrated and celebrated and celebrated. But one thing that is important is that whilst we're celebrating, we recognize that we had to take stock of where we were, where we came from. We mapped the challenges, and we celebrated the successes. So this was the gist of the celebration. And the celebration was not just a celebratory event where we dance and enjoy ourselves. And of course, we did dance, because there's a reason why we should do that, and we did that. But we also recognize the fact that we cannot just take one day to celebrate Maputo. So for this year, we said that we want to have a celebration that will have significance and impact, and that will speak to the issues relating to popularizing, ratification, domestication, and implementation. So this year, we're going to have a year-long celebration. We had 2 days in Nairobi, but we're going to have a year-long celebration that will start from the 11th of July, when the protocol was adopted, to the 10th of July, 2024. So it's going to be a roadmap, and everybody will have a role and a stake in that celebratory event. I think, as you rightly pointed out, the protocol is a beacon of hope for the women of this continent. And that's the why we felt that it's not just enough to just celebrate in Maputo. We need to go around in most of the countries, so that the women who really matter, the women that the protocol is meant for, actually know about the protocol. Because some of the challenges we have is that, with the best of intention, and that's how innovative the protocol is, there are women in the continent who don't know about the protocol.
Excellent.
So, and it's important that women realize that some of the challenges they face in their context relates to rights violation. And this is something we need to reinforce. It's not just social issues. These are rights violations. And states have actually ratified, and some have domesticated. So the women in that context need to know. I will just spend the next few minutes to just share with you some of the issues that came up during the 2-day celebration relating to ratification, domestication, and implementation, and what we shared with the women and the men of the continent as we were celebrating. I mean, we reinforce the fact that what we want, the desire we want is universal ratification of the Maputo Protocol. We commended and celebrated the fact that today we have 44 countries that have ratified the Maputo Protocol. It's quite commendable, and we're not taking it for granted. Yes, 44 countries that have ratified the protocol, and we took the opportunity to celebrate the newest mother that delivered the Maputo Protocol in their country, because we use the analogy of the midwives and the delivery. And we reinforce the fact that for Maputo Protocol, for some people, it's 20 years old. For some, it's 15 years old in their context. For some, it's 10, because ratification is an ongoing process. But for South Sudan, they have a brand new baby. So we celebrated them and recognized that.
Beautiful, beautiful.
But having said that, we also recognize and reinforce the fact that we don't only celebrate those who are on board. We also need to recognize and encourage those that have not joined us yet, the 11 states that are still outstanding. Because we need to be very inclusive, because sometimes the non-ratification of the protocol is not that people don't have the will to ratify. Sometimes the context makes it very difficult for ratification. So we encourage and invite them to the fold. And in that respect, we called on the following countries: Somalia, Sudan, Botswana, Chad, Eritrea, Egypt, Burundi, Central African Republic, Madagascar, Morocco, and Niger, that have not yet ratified. We call them and we encourage them to come on board, because we believe that the rights that are enshrined in the protocol are there for every African woman. Every African woman is entitled to the rights that are enshrined in the protocol. So that's why we want to bring them on board. We also recognize the fact that non-ratification of the protocol poses challenges. Some of the women in the countries that the protocol is not ratified find themselves in a very difficult context. And that actually justifies the need for the ratification of the protocol to ensure that women in those countries have an instrument they can rely on to reinforce and uphold their rights as they face and they're confronted with challenges. So these are some of the issues that we discuss. We recognize the fact that in my capacity as a special rapporteur on the rights of women, we encourage them, that we're ready to hold their hands. We're ready to make sure that they join the fold and join the community. Because sometimes you just need to do that. It's not just enough to name and shame, like I said. That's not the issue. In terms of ratification, this is where we are in terms of 44 countries. And we're glad to report that one of the countries had actually made an undertaking that hopefully very soon, who knows, before the end of the month of July, we will have a 45th country, but we have to wait until we see that. But at least we were glad that we had that commitment during the celebratory events. And that actually shows a positive outcome of the celebration. Yeah, that was very good. Apart from ratification also, the protocol has actually been very instrumental in the policy development within the continent, at the level of the African Commission, at the level of the AU, and at the level of member states. Several member states have adopted policies that speak to actually the ideals, the spirit, and the ethos of the Maputo Protocol, and this is quite commendable, and we actually celebrated that and recognized that. At the level of the African Commission, within the theme and the context of this panel, we've also, beyond the hard law that is contained in the Maputo Protocol, we've actually promulgated and adopted several instruments, and we shared those instruments with the participants during the celebratory event. And one of them is the guidelines on combating sexual violence. We call them the NYAMI guidelines, which actually has a whole array of principles, guidelines that we commend to member states, national human rights institutions, the AU, and civil society organizations to come on board to see how we can actually ensure that the menace of violence against women and girls within the continent becomes a thing of the past. And
so from what I can hear, success stories, which is excellent.
Excellent, yes.
Do you have a favorite success story that came out of it?
Sorry?
Do you have a favorite success story that has come out of it so far?
A favorite?
Success story that has come out of the Maputo Protocol.
Of the Maputo Protocol?
Yes.
Well, I can point you to a number of countries that have actually expressly domesticated, because domestication is not always a matter of just having a law that says, I'm here to domesticate Maputo Protocol. You can have express domestication, and you can also have implicit domestication by ensuring that you have laws that actually domesticate and try to implement certain articles of the Maputo Protocol. If I can use the Gambia, I'm Gambian, but I'm just celebrating the fact that the Gambia actually has a legislation in the Gambia, which is called the Women's Act 2010. And if you look at the long title of the act, which tells you what the act is all about, it says expressly, it is an act to domesticate Maputo Protocol and the CEDAW, which is quite commendable. It's a commendable thing that we can do. But apart from the Gambia, we also have countries like Kenya. I can just share some of them, because the Kenyan constitution has a provision that makes it possible for international instruments like the Maputo Protocol to be directly applicable at the national context, without even the need to domesticate international law. Namibia expressly provides that the Maputo Protocol is part of the laws of Namibia. This is quite commendable, and this is all because of the adoption of the Maputo Protocol as we celebrate 20 years. But having highlighted the commendable things, we have Gambia, we have Malawi, so many other countries, we cannot name all of them, just to say that the protocol has influenced law and policy within the African context.
That's amazing.
But beyond that, one of the things we caution is that you can have good instrument, innovative, you can have good laws, progressive, but those laws must be such that they have impact and they're able to improve the life of women within the continent. Therefore, we also said the judiciary, those who actually have the responsibility to interpret the law. As lawyers, we say the law is what the judges say it means, must be brought on board, so that they actually interpret the Maputo in a progressive manner, so that when women go to court, they're able to have recourse. Because the worst thing that can happen within the context we come from, it's very difficult to go to court in the first place. If you muster the courage to go to court and then you find that the judges themselves are not progressive, then it becomes a problem. So these were some of the issues that we reiterated. As we celebrated all the successes, but we recognize that since 20 years ago, we've been engaged in so many battles that we've won, but we recognize the fact that even though we've won some of the battles, the war is still ongoing, because we have to make sure that we have collective and concerted effort and sustained efforts to keep raising awareness, so that the women of the continent, like I said, need to know what the Maputo Protocol is and what it represents for them. I think that's very important.
Thank you so much.
And
I'm
then
going to,
in
if I
terms
can just
of that,
pause you there so we can bring the others in the conversation.
Okay, very well. I was just going to share the call to action that we had for the states,
yes,
but we'll come to that.
On the call to
very
action.
Well. Yeah.
Thank you. So let me now go to the AU summit that happened in February, because a major decision was made at the summit, and I want to emphasize the word major. The decision was to negotiate an AU convention that would primarily be framed around the issue of ending violence against women and girls in Africa. So this was a historic decision, really. And this will be the first of its kind globally, as far as treaties. So Dr. Naradzai, can you talk about this proposed AU convention? What do you think that women and girls in Africa would want to come out of this convention? And how can we ensure that their voices are not only heard, but are being documented in the papers that will be delivered for approval at the African Union Commission?
Thank you so much. I'm doing a little dance in my heart. A dance of celebrating a decision of the African Union heads of states for us to have an African convention on ending violence against women. It's a major decision. It's taking forward Article 4 of the Maputo Protocol and expanding it. So I want to congratulate our heads of states. I want to congratulate Africa. Yesterday at the opening session, we had a number of African heads of states with us. Here at Women Deliver, again, congratulations to Women Deliver and to my sister, Dr. Pumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka, the chair, and others for really positioning the African story. That Africa is not just about gloom and doom, it's also about building the normative framework for women's enjoyment of all their human rights. So it's a pleasure to be on this panel and to join with my colleagues and with my king, and we've worked together very closely on the Council for Traditional Leaders in Africa. You asked two questions. What is that content? And how can women and girls participate? Naming is norming. The Convention on Elimination of Violence Against Women needs to appropriately name some of the issues that we deal with. I've been the African Union Goodwill Ambassador on Ending Child Marriage since 2014 until last year. And I continue to question language like child marriage. Because a child cannot marry. We are talking about rape, sexual exploitation, abuse, all forms of violence. So what we want to see in the Convention on Ending Violence Against Women and Girls is appropriate naming of the different forms of violence, so that we don't sanitize and minimize and normalize certain forms of violence. Intimate violence, how can it be intimate and violent? How? We need to question the language. So that is the first thing that I feel is very critical as we frame the convention. The second is the convention would not be complete without a bigger commitment to addressing the underlying causes of violence against women, the prevention agenda. And on the prevention, yes, we will continue to want to shift the social norms, which my king will talk about. But we also want to talk about the economics of violence against women. We want to talk about patriarchy. Africa is filthy rich, damn rich, sorry to use the language. But African women are licking the spoon and experiencing extreme violence linked to poverty and exclusion. We must say violence against women is not a micro household issue. It is also a macroeconomic and governance issue. It's very important for the convention to address this issue. Thirdly, the convention must talk about issues of protection of women's human rights and survivors of gender-based violence. It must talk about justice. It must talk about justice. We must talk about impunity, men in power, whether it's the father in power or the uncle or the pastor or the chief or the politician, men in power thinking they can abuse and nothing happens. We must have the convention to address impunity in stable countries, in conflict countries, and context is very critical. And this convention must not be polite. It needs to address real issues, violence of women in conflict, electoral violence, incest, all these very hard issues, humanitarian, safeguarding, the critical, hard to manage issues, they must be in the convention. The convention is incomplete without healing and rebuilding. We can prevent, but others will continue to experience. We can protect, but also when you have experienced violence, you need to heal. You need to rebuild your lives. The work that Rosaria Memorial Trust and many other community groups are doing, education, mental health, psychosocial support, all in the schools, in the communities, in places of work, we need safe environments for women in the convention. Lastly, the two aspects in the convention relate, it's an accountability instrument. A convention is not a political declaration. It's an accountability instrument and should be accountability through laws, resources, institutional support, institutional mechanisms. And to just quickly dash to your last question on, therefore, how can we be involved? African women have been on their feet before the AU was formed. The Pan-African Women's Organization was formed. We have been raising these issues forever, and will continue to be involved in the convention. Whether we are talking about the existing networks like the Gender is My Agenda campaign, the African Women Leaders Network, the Wilders, the many networks, the SOA networks, which monitors the Maputo. And participation is not the same as involvement.
Say that again.
Inclusion.
Say that again.
Participation can be presence, just to be present here does not mean that you participate.
Thank you.
Participate is about voice.
Thank you.
It's about being heard, having the right to, having the opportunity to be heard, removing the barriers. Digital is good, but digital is exclusionary. This Women Deliver is great, but if it is digital based only for those who cannot come, it's exclusionary. So we really want the process of developing our convention to come to my village, to go to Karachonyo there, to go to the villages out there. We really need we need to be in Asmara. We need to be beyond the mountains and the valleys, where we walk by feet to reach there. And not only go where it's very comfortable, because where would I sleep? You sleep where the women in that village sleep. And you negotiate their convention.
Eating ugali.
So we really need to step out of the comfort zone.
Yes.
Digital inequalities addressed. This leave no one behind, not to be a rhetoric. We don't need small little windows of funding to all the donors and all people who have a little bit of money. You know what? African women and girls need big doors and showers of resources for them to negotiate their convention. A little window of funding to do one workshop does not address us to talk to the chiefs, to talk to the commissioners, to talk to the governments with one workshop. It doesn't happen. We need significant partnerships, strategic resourcing as we work on the convention. And lastly, the African Convention is not for Africa. We are not domesticating international law. We are co-creating international law because a convention does not exist anywhere on violence against women. It would be the first. So it means Africa would be co-creating with the world what a convention on ending violence against women could look like, expanding the frontiers of CEDAW, expanding the frontiers of the Convention on the Rights of the Child, expanding the notions in the CPR and others. But lastly, it's about inclusion of our diversity. You saw me being wheeled here. 2 years ago, I joined the disability movement. We are very artificial at times as humanity. We talk about inclusion and diversity, but in the actual, practical discrimination that happens to people who are different from what is considered to be the norm, whatever it is, whether it's people in displaced camps, the whole issue of diversity and inclusion should lie at the heart of how we negotiate our convention and who comes to the table on our convention. I was so happy to see sign language here.
Yes.
Again, thank you so much.
Thank you. Such a beautiful vision that you have shared for the proposed AU convention. I'm so glad that you mentioned language, because language cannot be separated from culture. So I'd like to talk to His Royal Highness about culture, the influence of culture in terms of promoting what we're here to talk about, gender equality. Your Royal Highness, you are the custodian of the traditions and cultures of your community. Thank you so much for being here. Can you talk about the positive role that traditional leadership can play in ending violence against women and girls?
Merci, Madame.
Thank you very much, Madam. And I hope that the room also would be able to understand what I'm saying. We are those who are on the field. We are not we're not politicians, we are not from the government. So we talk directly, and we talk about what we see on the field. In 2018, during a UN Women meeting, that was when I met Madame, that I learned that Niger, my country, had the highest child marriage rate. And from then on, we decided to act more than speak. And I'm just going to talk about our own example to show you how much traditional leadership, not just in Niger, but Africa as a whole, can truly impact when it comes to violence against women and girls. Now, from 2018, we took the decision to act. We started with what? We started by calling on all the village heads in all the different communities. Now, as from now, I want them to create 200 young girl protection committees in my kingdom. And these committees would have imams, heads of communities, women representatives, and youth representatives. They will work together to give me feedback and report of all the threats to the health, but also to education of these young women. The second thing, between 2018 to 2020, we worked on this. And after a UNFPA study, in 2020, we got to 0 child marriages in our kingdom. Already, in 50 years, we had never had female genital mutilation in our kingdom. This is on the one hand. On the other hand, and I said to these heads of villages and the different communities, I told them, go to your people, tell them, and this is not an order, tell them that every family must give me a contribution, even if the contribution is 100 people, just one. We were able, in 2019, collect more than 4,000 items from these people, and we have a partner that found that it was good, and I added to it. They were able to double it, and together we were able to assist them, because before you had a lot of begging from women, help us to buy sanitary pads, help us to buy pods, help us for health care. Too much begging. So from 2019 till date, because we continue with the contribution, we have 0 begging from women and girls and even men and boys for health support. In my village, everything is free for all the people. We mobilize local resources to resolve their problems. Girl-child education. There are a lot of people that are out of school because there's no follow-up. In 2020, we had some people who were supported, and all the girls who were failing their exams and their families could not fund them in school, we invited them to come and freely register in our program, and they were taken care of 100%. In 2020, 113 girls registered. In 2021, 163 girls registered. This year, with the partnership of other programs, the new program will be launched in our kingdom. All the girls who will fail their exams, they're invited to come and register with us so that they can be taken care of 100% and they can get a second chance. Our schools are there for girls. A lot of girls, they were even sitting on the ground on the few tables that they had in the schools. The same thing, we have a resource mobilization system that works. We called everybody. Go to the cities, go to their villages, tell them I want them to contribute. And we were able to make 1,000 tables that was able to resolve the problems of a lot of schools that did not have tables. And we did not stop at that. We continued and we set up an education and practical site for these people. And these places will be able to host 200 rural girls. They will be trained. They will be trained. They will produce and they will sell their own produce, and the works of their hand will contribute to life and will contribute to empower them, and we will not leave anybody behind. With such results, madam, and if we are able to get all the traditional leaders involved like this, without even talking about, before we even talk about treaties and conventions, we would be able to even have more results already. We work a lot on what exists on the ground. Governments, we work a lot on these conventions. Governments can sign all of these things, but traditional leaders, when they are involved, when they are organized, they would be able to get results that such institutions will not even be able to get, because these are people. These are the most listened to and the most respected institutions by the local people. And even Niger is a very good example. And thinks that if we are able to get all of Niger involved, why not Cameroon? Why not Senegal? Why not Chad? Why not Kenya? Why not all the other countries that have traditional leaders, even if they are religious leaders, like in Senegal and in Mauritania? I believe is that the change will come. And you would see that we would make much more progress, faster than even signing treaties and conventions that definitely would be difficult to implement. Here, we continue to act. We are making concrete acts. We have started, we will continue, and by the grace of God, you would see results again very soon. Thank you.
Excellent. And Mrs. Gebrahan, I'd like to ask you to have the final word here. You hear a very passionate male in our midst who's very passionate about seeing the issues that we're talking about come to fruition. Can you talk about, with your experience, how can men be engaged in this very important work in a way that is both egalitarian and progressive? Because sometimes male involvement can be a bit tricky, if I can use the word. So just talk about your experiences, how we can bring them in a way that gives women an equal voice as well.
Thank you so much, Chico. But before I respond to that question, I just want to thank Niara Dazi for recognizing my hometown, Asmara, in her hope and vision. So thank you so much. And then also thank you for bringing some tricky elements of this journey, not just celebrating what is going on well, but also talking about the challenge is very important. So violence against women prevention work requires the involvement of everyone, men, women, boys, and girls. But because it is like the norms are held by everyone, and everyone can play a role in either keeping or transforming those norms. So programs that are addressing violence against women should really make sure that they are working with everyone. And the controversy or the trickiness arises when we look at what is happening. Initiatives that are trying to involve men and boys are disconnecting from the feminist analysis, the gender power analysis. And they are not practicing or upholding accountability to women and causing a lot of harm to women in general, to the movement, and then women rights organizations. We all know the intention of men engaged is for them to claim the responsibility of violence that is being committed and engage in process to transform, to changing themselves, as well as transforming the structures and processes that are upholding violence against women. So this intention doesn't get translated on the ground. What we are seeing on the ground is the focus is shifting from the structural and systemic violence against women to more context-related, isolated violence against women, that is against men, and because they are not based on feminist analysis. And also the investment that is growing towards supporting men and boys engagement is really causing limited engagement for women. There is limited space. Spaces are shrinking for women to lead. Women initiated this process, this journey, and now they are being sidelined. And when women are sidelined and they are put in a subordinate position, this is a replication of patriarchy. And we all agree, everyone in this room agrees that violence against women requires transformation, transforming the patriarchal norms, practices, systems, and structures. So men engage initiatives or actions and programming are really replicating, some of the programs are replicating patriarchy. And we can work as allies, as partners. And how does allyship look like? Allyship looks like men to really have critical self-reflection about themselves at a personal and organizational level, and recognizing the power and the privilege they have. And then using the power and the privilege to transform the systems and uphold the leadership of women who have been doing this work for decades. And also ensuring there is collaboration and consultation with women rights organizations. When those consultations happen, it's not just ticking the box, but it should be accompanied by authentic and deep listening, so they know what they are doing is in support of the women. It's translating the intention of creating equitable gender relationships. And I think if we have that consultation, men will be able to know when to step forward and when to step backward and allow women to lead. So my call to everyone in this room who's supporting men engaged work, whether it's a policy, funding, on programming, it has to really be informed by critical gender power analysis, and it has to include mechanisms for accountability to women and girls. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. A final round of applause for these distinguished panelists, please. And may I direct your attention now to the screens for another short video. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ngwenya. I come from a small country in Southern Africa, and I work as a domestic worker. Although it helps me to have a regular income, I have dreams of financial freedom. I want to be able to take care of my children and have enough money to save for their future. My parents are now elderly, and they look to me for financial support as well. I feel like despite my best efforts, I'm always frustrated about money. But in the spirit of tenacity, I started a chicken broiler farming business in 2021. But I couldn't access bank loans because I'm deemed high risk. So I usually turn to my money lending cooperative scheme for short-term loans. Now this helps me meet my most immediate financial needs, but it doesn't take away my persistent feelings of frustration. I cannot save for a rainy day because it feels as though every day is raining for me. My amazing daughter mentioned the Maputo Protocol one day, specifically Article 13, which speaks of the economic and social welfare rights of African women, and it promises that the continent will create conditions to promote and support the occupations and economic activities of women, in particular within the informal sector. That's me, right? So how can I be a part of the people who enjoy these rights? How can I too feel the benefits of this amazing protocol? Please help me.
Your Excellencies, First Lady of Namibia, and First Lady of Burundi, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed, welcome to this session where our eminent guest will provide valuable insight and perspectives on promising practices on how to connect policy to people to scale up the advancement of gender equality and women's empowerment in Africa, in line with the Maputo Protocol. Without further delay, I'm pleased to introduce you to the distinguished member of this panel, Dr. Aïdara Fatoumata, Director of Sahel for Plan International. Her Excellency Monica Gengos, First Lady of Namibia and President of the Organization of African First Ladies for Development, OFLAD, and Her Excellency Angélique Ndayishimiye, First Lady of the Republic of Burundi. My first question goes to Dr. Aïdara Fatoumata. Based on your remarkable career in advancing gender equality, what should AU partners focus on to make sure policy reach the people?
Thank you. Your Excellencies, all protocol duly respected, ladies and gentlemen. Before starting to respond to this question, I would like just to talk a little bit about my story, and very quickly. I am from Timbuktu. I don't know if for some of you have chance to travel to Timbuktu. Just to tell you, I'm coming very far for two things. Being very far, and also as a girl coming from this side, part of Africa, what is mean being here today? When I was 16 years old and I was asked to the 10th shores of the day whilst my brothers were playing outside the house, something in my brain just snapped. I didn't have the language, honestly, of gender equality this time, but I knew something was wrong. And I asked myself 100 questions. Why me? What exactly is happening? And I realized that the path set for me by my biology did not match my dreams. I immediately started to mobilize, joining with other girls of my age in local community to advocate for changes to make our life better. Soon after my first international event in Finland, joining my sisters from overworld, building a movement and providing each other with the language, tools, and solidarity to make a difference. Zoom forward today, as I said, through my efforts, but also because I have been lucky enough to connect with fantastic allies, what others didn't have from my country. I have been given a lifeline. I'm contributing to make a real difference. But we know that girls and young women across our continent are continually being held back, and in many cases are vulnerable than ever, as fragility, conflict, and food insecurity continue to exert disproportionate toll on the lives of children and girls in the Sahel and the Horn of Africa. We at Plan International have just completed some in-depth qualitative research talking to girls and young women who are directly affected in Burkina Faso and in Mali. In the Sahel, the rate of child, early and forced marriages is higher than everywhere else in the world. 6 out of 10 of the countries with the highest rate of marriage are, in fact, in West Africa. And our experience over 80 years of programming has taught us that girls and young women are best placed to control their own destiny. They are the experts of their own lives. Bodily autonomy is the fundamental principle that no girls, no young woman should ever be forced into any harmful practice or subject to any form of violence. Adolescent girls and women need access to sexual, reproductive health services to meet their need, make informed choices over their own bodies. So for us, there are 3 themes that are linked and must be addressed together. One, urgent need for girls and young women voices to be heard, included in the highest decision-making spaces like this. The particular urgency of the situation faced by girls in crisis situation across food security, health, education, and protection. The essential right to bodily autonomy supported by sexual and reproductive health. I call on the state parties to the African Union and its partners to meaningfully, as you ask, involve girls and youth in the design, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation of public policies, budget, and legislation. To strengthen accountability mechanism, this is very important to track progress. And lastly, urgently increase funding. I'm saying funding and funding again to ensure full access to sexual and reproductive health services to all my younger sisters, including the one in the humanitarian setting. We look forward to working with key institutions across Africa, such as the AU, the African Development Bank, in order to make this a reality. Please join me in doing all you can to make this a reality. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Dr. Haidara, for your valuable recommendations. I now turn to you, Your Excellency, Mrs. Gengos. As the president of the Organization of Africa First Ladies for Development and as the founder of the One Economic Foundation, how should the First Ladies advocate for women and girls to deliver on the Maputo Protocol, and what lessons have you learned in connecting the powerless to the powerful in Namibia that we can all learn from? Thank you.
So I want to answer your question, but before I answer the what do First Ladies do, I feel always this obligation to explain the how. Is a First Lady elected? What is her mandate? And I want you to think of a First Lady very much like somebody who has a secret superpower. Nobody knows how you got it. Some people resent you, some think you're a hero, other things that you're a villain. And it's really up to you whether you want to use this superpower to rob a bank or to help others. And that's really how I think of being a First Lady and the power of First Lady, because actually we don't have power, we have influence. Those of you yesterday who were at the opening ceremony, you noticed that there was a president on the platform, and the moderator, who was incredible, nudged him from 50 scholarships to 100. And that's the power of proximity, which is what First Ladies have. You have the power of proximity, so you can nudge 50 to 100. But unlike the moderator who did it publicly, if you want to be effective as a First Lady, like Superman doesn't hide. Clark Kent doesn't say he's Superman. He hides it. So a First Lady, to be effective, you have to hide your superpower. So you don't nudge publicly, hey, make it 100. So I think that's what the organization does. We leverage that incredible power and institutionalize it and apply it across the continent. What is the Organization of African First Ladies doing? You say, I'm the president. I'm sorry to divert. But when I was elected president of this organization, I went home and I said to my husband, there are 2 presidents in this house now. And my husband didn't find it very funny. So I've stopped. I want to change the name. It brings trouble. But anyway, what the organization does is it helps leverage. So it helps to fundraise, and it channels money to First Ladies who are doing some incredible projects. And we also learn from each other. We benchmark. The First Lady of Burundi recently got an incredible award from the United Nations on addressing population issues in Burundi, and we're very proud of her. So it shows you how First Ladies can have international impact. The First Lady of Sierra Leone, 18 November, every single year is going to be the day the day for the elimination and accountability of child sexual violence. That was something that was motivated by a First Lady at the United Nations. The First Lady of Gabon, she's done incredible work where her work on cancer has been absorbed by government and has been made into policy. The First Lady of this country, Janet Kagame, one of the most intelligent people I know, who's running one of the most powerful foundations, and many First Ladies use her to benchmark. So all the organization does, it uses that inherent power to leverage, to fundraise, and to see how can we do things collectively. Right now, as First Ladies, we are working on a unified campaign that's going to require each First Lady to launch on the same topics, which are very similar to what's contained in the Maputo Protocol. So each First Lady for the next 12 months in her country will be launching on issues relating to education, to health, and within health, she can decide what she wants. Is it female genital mutilation? Is it pediatric HIV? Is it reproductive health? She decides what she wants to do. So it's education, it's health, it's economic empowerment, it's gender-based violence. Very similar to the priority areas of the Maputo Protocol. What does this mean? It means that the low road that we are anticipating will have enough First Ladies to launch to populations of at least 700 million Africans. Very few people can leverage that type of platform. So back to the superpower, it's a use it or lose it superpower. It's also time bound. So in the time that you have it, you almost have an obligation to use it correctly. And I think that's what the organization does in order to support not only the Maputo Protocol, but generally to link the powerful to the powerless, which now goes into your next question. Because young people are probably sitting wondering, but I don't even know who my First Lady is in my country. I don't know what the hell this woman is talking about. Well, technology makes all of us very accessible. I'm not a fan of social media, but I remain on simply because it gives young people access to me, people who I otherwise wouldn't have met, who I become exposed to utilize technology to make that accessibility work. How does one economy link, and what are the lessons? To me, the lessons are more on the soft issues. We must be careful as a continent of allowing a sense of powerlessness in our people. Because from powerlessness, and you can see the hatred, you can see the violence that's starting to grow, that's signs of powerlessness. When people feel powerless, it often manifests in violence. So we must address general levels of violence in society. Young people must be safe, women must be safe, and most importantly, men must be safe. Because when we talk about gender-based violence, we forget that a man has a much higher likelihood anywhere in the world of being killed by another man, more than a woman. So even men are scared of men. So when there's generally high levels of societal violence, there'll be high levels of gender-based violence. And you link it back to powerlessness. So how we distribute resources must be fair. There must be equity in this distribution across gender, across tribal lines, across anything that denotes unfairness. Because often the drivers of violence are socioeconomic factors. So that's one of the things we realized when we do gender-based violence work. In order to bring gender-based violence down, you must bring general levels of violence down. Another thing that we've seen in our work of linking powerful to powerless is substance abuse and mental health. Our continent has some of the highest rates out of 10 of the high suicide countries in the world. 6 are in Africa. So this is showing we're not responding from a public health perspective towards mental health crises. And when you think of most of our countries, many of us are post-conflict. And these kind of societal issues are normal in post-conflict societies, but because we're told stop being a victim, it's over, get over it, we also don't define ourselves as post-conflict, but we are. And why it's important to define yourself as post-conflict? It is then where you'll realize mental health, suicide rates, social dysfunction, substance abuse, it's part of that. And you integrate that into your national developmental agenda and you fund it. Mental health, substance abuse is not properly funded right now in any developmental agenda of countries that I know of, including Namibia. And those are things that we are discovering in order for you to have this economic growth and these beautiful prospects that we speak about. In order, we must heal our people. And there's a lot to heal from. So those are some of the lessons. Another lesson that I've learned, because we go to the grassroots a lot, and community engagement often starts angry, especially in communities who aren't used to political people there. So for the first 30 minutes, you're going to be shouted at. And sometimes, and this is maybe guidance, is let people speak and hear what they say and not how they are saying it. Because often we react with our egos, we no longer listen to what is being said. We're only concerned about how it's being said. Let people articulate themselves the way they like. Your job is to listen, but listen to what, not how, and how it affects you. So those are some of the lessons, firstly on First Ladies, on how we do things, and also on what we've learned about linking the powerful to the powerless, access, the responsibility of proximity to power. But I think my final point is to everybody in this room. You don't need to be elected. You don't need to be mandated. And First Ladies have social capital that we didn't work for. But like anything, we must spend the social capital. So lead from where you are. Think of it as a leadership model of the cattle herder. Where does the cattle herder lead from? From behind. We don't all have to be in front, in the spotlight. Some lead from behind, and I think that's what First Ladies are doing quite well.
Thank you. Thank you, Excellency, for sharing promising practice, both at continental and national level, based on powerful sisterhood. I think we need to, it's a very great example given by our First Ladies. Thank you again. I think we can clap. Huh? Je me tourne vers vous, Excellence Madame Angélique
Madame Angélique Nachimiye, the First Lady of Burundi, as the chair of the Office of the First Lady of the Ngwenya office and founder of the Women Organization. And what work do these organizations do to ensure that women's rights are protected for each and every one of us? Thank you. Thank you very much. Your Excellency, the First Lady of Namibia, my President, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I'm very happy to participate in this very important session of Women Deliver 2023, which is under Maputo Protocol. Which is why I want to use this opportunity to thank the organizers of this event, particularly Her Excellency Janet Kagame, the First Lady of the Republic of Rwanda, who properly understanding the role that we need to play as women leaders, as high-level women leaders, has invited me to this event. Let's clap. So, let's now come back to your question. The protection and promotion of women and girls' rights. And this has always been a major concern for me. And this is what led me to create the Association for Women, the Mugina Neza Association. And you see, the promotion of women and girls and their empowerment are part of the priorities of the Office of the First Lady of Burundi for Development. Through the organization, in the movement, my vision is to create a proper environment for speaking, for lobbying in order to promote the most important rights of women. This organization has contributed to a lot of initiatives and have all contributed to empowerment. Now, on the Bonne Action Ngwenya Foundation, I established the foundation in 2019 with a goal to aid the vulnerable group of people to contribute to healthcare, education, and to assist all the different layers, particularly the vulnerable group in society. Since its establishment, this foundation continues to promote women's rights and girls' rights, particularly when it comes to healthcare and education. It is in this regard that we have then worked on supporting to ensure that we support women that are going through fistula, as well as creating an IVF department in the Ngwenya Health Center. Now, with regards to the Office of the First Lady of Burundi for Development, our main office is to contribute to the well-being and the general health of women, young people, and children, of course, without forgetting aged people. Thus, in order to promote women's rights and for their empowerment, a lot of initiatives and activities have been carried out, and others are ongoing. Amongst them, we have all yearly organized meetings and discussions for military wives who discuss different issues that have an impact on their lives, including women's rights. We also have awareness creation activities for maternal health that is also linked to family planning, fighting against HIV/AIDS, fighting against child malnutrition, particularly for children less than 5 years old, but also the elderly group of people. But also, we are fighting against maternal and infant mortality. The sensitization workshops that we organize to also prevent early pregnancy with young girls, and we organize sensitization activities to promote menstrual hygiene amongst young girls. And even though the Maputo Protocol already defines the protection and the promotion of women's rights, there are still challenges. I would mention some of them. Some countries have not yet ratified it. Some have also issued their reserves. We also have religious beliefs, culture, and tradition, and all of these are often the sources of discrimination against women. And to conclude, I would say that everybody, we must come together, pool resources to deal with these challenges which remain a major obstacle to socio-economic fulfillment of women and girls. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Your Excellency, the First Lady of Burundi.
Primera dama de la República de Burundi. Ahora hemos llegado al final de esta sesión. Permítanme concluir esta sesión diciéndoles lo que he escuchado, que me parece muy importante sobre una decisión o sobre un tema que es la rendición de cuentas. Creo que es muy importante. Las tres panelistas lo han mencionado en diferentes partes de sus intervenciones. Los partenariados, el poder, la sororidad. Tenemos el poder y tenemos mujeres, primeras damas poderosas y mujeres importantes, que han sido muy importantes en sus carreras profesionales y que son un modelo a seguir para otras personas jóvenes en toda África. Vamos a dar un fuerte aplauso a todos los panelistas.
Please watch the screen as a video will be projected. Thank you again. Okay. Yeah.
Hey, I'm back again. My name is Kofi, and I'm from a country in West Africa. The best way to describe myself is, I'm a he for she. I believe that women's rights are Africa's rights. In my community, I participate in convening conversations with men and boys so we can deconstruct the harmful behavior that we perpetuate as men against the women in our societies. These conversations help us reclaim the narrative of what it means to be an African man. I met Aisha at work and got to know of many African women who share Ngwasi's experience as well. I worry every day that conversations are not simply enough. I would like to see an Africa where men listen to the needs of women and meet them at the bridge to ensure the rights they are promised in the Maputo Protocol touch every aspect of their lives. No woman should ever have to be subjected to harmful practices. All women should have the economic and social rights not only upheld, but also aggressively pursued. I'm standing at the bridge and asking what it will take for he for she's such as myself and the entire continent to make sure the Maputo Protocol reaches the many Aishas and Ngwasis across Africa. I don't have the answers, but I am hoping that together we will come up with some exciting and sustainable solutions.
All right, everyone, I hope we're still hanging in there this afternoon. This is the very last element of this plenary. Women and youth financial and economic inclusion. That is the topic of this final conversation. Once again, women and youth financial and economic inclusion. For the conversation we have, once again, Ms. Prudence Ngwenya, the director at the AUC Women, Gender and Youth Directorate. Also, we have joining us Ms. Christine Bangana. She is the CEO of Ngwenya Bank PLC right here in Rwanda. Thank you so much for joining us, ladies. If I could begin with the AU's recent initiative, the AU has launched the Women and Youth Financial and Economic Inclusion, and of course, this was launched to support the overall objectives of the Maputo Protocol. Ms. Prudence, can you tell us one element of this initiative that you want those of us who are not familiar with it to leave here knowing? Just one element.
Thank you very much, Chika. One element that has got three parts. It's really, Wi-Fi is a story of the ladder of financial inclusion for women and young people. So imagine all of us are in a ladder with different rungs. The story of Wi-Fi says, let's make sure that people are climbing up the ladder. Those that are in rung number 3 should be going to rung number 6, and if you're in rung number 6, you should be going to rung number 17. But everybody needs to be on the ladder, and everybody needs to be going up the ladder and not going down the ladder. And it's also really about being intentional about financial and economic inclusion for women and young people. And lastly, actually, something that resonates with me, and I hope it will stay on, a quote from Her Excellency Sir Leif Johnson this morning. Women are on a journey. The journey is irreversible. This is the story of the ladder.
Beautiful.
Nobody should come
Beautiful.
down.
An irreversible journey. Excellent. Well said. And Mrs. Christine, can I ask you about the bank? Your bank has put in place many measures to economically and financially empower women. What is the most favorite initiative that your bank is taking on in this arena?
I will respond through a story of Savera Musabe Maria, who about 15 years ago heard that there was a bank that gives loans to women. Now, Urugwego's mission is to reach the underserved, and the majority of whom are women. So Savera comes to the bank unsure of herself, thinking that banks are there for men originally, and she gets a loan. She begins a peanut business in a market. Fast forward, she comes from a struggling family that lived on subsistence farming, poor, lack of confidence. She would describe her life as very sad. She begins her business through multiple loans, And the flagship program for Urwego is training. So we provide training before you get a loan. We equip women to know who they are. We equip them to know that extreme poverty is not a lack of material things, but a lack of knowing what you have and access to financial services. And she got a loan. Today, Severa employs 50 employees. She buys health insurance for her communities. She has taken on orphans, about 8 orphans in her community. She runs multiple businesses, a grocery store, hardware store, and she has multiple properties for rental. The one thing that our bank has done is to invest in the dreams of the underserved, majority of whom are women, by providing the training that they need, providing the loans that they need, and hand-holding them during the initial stages of using financial services. Most of these women, what excites me most is to know that this will be the first time that they're accessing a financial service or a product that will lift them out of poverty. One thing that stays with me is that when you ask Severa, what do you think now? She says, I'm actually capable. I never knew that I was capable, but I'm capable to provide for my family and community.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
Any final words as we end the plenary once and for all? If I can give it to you, Ms. Prudence.
Yes. I think for me, most importantly, and in the spirit of Wi-Fi, is that we need to create opportunities. Creating opportunities for women and young people, but also invest in them and unleash their potential in a way. And ideally, Agenda 2063 speaks to unleashing the potential of women and young people on the continent as well as their children. So we unleash them by making sure that they are also playing their role as they should in the economic development of the continent. And maybe the other thing is to make sure that then we make continuous investments in other spheres of their lives to make sure that they're prosperous.
Excellent. And any final word as far as how the banking sector can continue to be a part of women empowerment in Africa?
Yeah. So this incredible story of Severa is just one of the hundreds that we know when you provide tailored financial services, which is life transforming. And they also tell us that at the intersection of financial inclusion, African realities must inform the design of the products and services that we give to our communities. And in addition to that, like for Rwanda's case, there has been intentional policies to promote women empowerment. There's been political will to elevate equality and equity, and the deliberate collaboration between the private and public sector. And this shows that it can actually be achieved. And to crown it all, a conference like this, where you're not only talking about women empowerment, but talking about what women are delivering. And this is liberating, but it's also eye-opening when we are sharing that 10 years later, 20 years later, what was agreed upon in the Maputo protocol is being achieved. There are many women like Severa, but there are many more that need to be reached.
Beautiful. So I hear you say that understanding the local context as well as initiating political will is of utmost priority. Thank you very much. A round of applause for these ladies, please. And at this moment, I would like to express my profound gratitude for the AU and all of its supporters all over the world. The Maputo Protocol is something that we can all appreciate, especially as it continues to bridge the gap between people, policies, and partnership. All right, everyone, that brings this plenary to an end. Thank you so much for joining us and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.